Welcome back. I feel like we have so many things to catch up on the garden compared to last month's garden tour. I have some new plantings that we're going to check in on. I have some awful things that we are going to rip out. I can't wait to get them just out of here. Fall is right around the corner, so I'm going to chit chat about some end of season things that we need to do, because if you're new here, I'm a zone 3/zone 4 Minnesota gardener, and we're gonna freeze here in about 4 weeks. I am feeling it. It is feeling like fall around here, so we need to get ready. Without further ado, let's dive into the garden tour. And if you are new here, welcome. Let's go ahead and do a quick overview of my garden so you can kind of get a sense of what's going on here. So this is an in-ground garden. It is about 52 feet wide and 25 feet long, and I have 3-foot wide planting rows with 1-foot wide walking paths that I'm starting to grow to despise. I did that because I'm a greedy gardener and I wanted as much planting space as possible, and it's starting to prove difficult when I have some prolific crops like these green beans that are just kind of taking over. So next garden, I'll probably do a little bit wider walking paths. And then for fencing, I love electric poultry netting. This stuff is awesome. It actually does keep the deer out, believe it or not, and we have a ton of deer. I'll make sure to link this in the description if you're interested. Let's go ahead and start with this first chunk here. These are largely my brassicas, which are doing great, except for one thing. I'm pretty nervous about one of them, which is a super bummer. We'll get to that back there, but let's go ahead and start up here. So what you're gonna notice throughout my garden, there's a lot of flowers. So, well, less than when I started. Of what flowers I have left are largely marigolds. So these are for companion planting. They really help repel pests and bring in beneficial insects. And I really think that has been my secret to success for keeping the cabbage worms off of my brassicas. So highly recommend that, especially marigolds, because they are pretty much the only ones that have survived the aster yellows. You're gonna notice throughout here, there's not very many flowers compared to earlier this spring. I had tons of calendula and we had nasturtiums. You can see we just have some of the marigolds here and marigolds there and just a couple there. So even a couple of the marigolds I had to pull out, but the rest are all gone, which is a super bummer, but so far so good. I haven't noticed an increase in the cabbage worms. I was super nervous about that happening with the loss of the flowers. So fingers crossed so we can just hold out the rest of the season. And what you'll notice here is there's a whole lot less of the cabbages. I had massive cabbages just kind of overflowing here, and I've gone ahead and harvested them. I made a bunch of sauerkraut. I think I have 13 quarts of sauerkraut in the fridge, so we are good to go with that. Uh-oh. I spoke too soon. Look at that. I'm seeing a little cabbage worm. I first got tipped off because of these little holes in the leaves. So I just kind of do a little pinch action. Goodbye. And I'm seeing some holes here. So let's see if they're on the underneath side. Not seeing him there. He must be traveling around. Okay, so I'm gonna have to get out here and start looking for cabbage worms. Well, okay, here we go. Okay, back to over here. So this is a little baby cabbage. We will see if we get any head formation before we freeze. No, thankfully cabbage does tolerate a light frost. So we'll just kind of see how September treats us on that guy. But he's so cute. I love this little cabbage so far. Now let's officially move back over to these guys. So these are my kohlrabi for a fall crop. Ryan absolutely loves these. These are his favorite vegetable. I'm not so much a fan, but so I largely grow these for him, but I'm glad that he enjoys them because I like growing them. They're just so cute. I love the purple variety. So these guys are looking good. We'll definitely be able to harvest these before it totally gets super cold. I also have a new planting of some little broccoli plants. I think I have 6 of them. I have 2 here, 2 there, and I believe there's 2 more somewhere. We'll find them as we go along. No head formation yet. I'm hoping that these will pick it up and we'll be able to get a harvest before the season is over. We will see. But these guys are looking good. I'm not seeing any of the cabbage worm damage on these, except for I'm seeing one hole here, but no worms. So definitely start keeping a close eye on them. And look at this. Oh my goodness, this cabbage is my pride and joy. I already harvested all the rest, but I'm just leaving this one just to see how big it's gonna get. The previous two biggest ones that I've harvested were 13 pounds, and this one's definitely bigger, and it hasn't split or anything, so I'm just kind of leaving it in here to see what we can get out of it. And we already have sauerkraut coming out of our ears, so oh my gosh, I don't know. I might have to donate this one to my parents or something. But so much fun. Definitely a great cabbage year. I would say the best cabbage year I've ever had. We have more marigolds that are behaving themselves and doing really well. And then we moved on to our early season broccoli. So I have 6 different broccoli plants here, another 6 here. And do you guys remember how these were taking over my rows? I couldn't even walk through here. And I've kind of solved that issue. You can see that these are the new growth leaves. They're just looking great. But the older stuff is darker, and even this stuff is starting to yellow. So I've been snapping these off, and then that's been making a whole lot more room for the walking path. So thankfully solved that issue since the new growth is pretty compact. And we're still getting side shoots, so I'm still, snapping these off and utilizing these. These are like perfect size already. You don't even have to chop it up for making stir fry or whatever else. So I love leaving my broccoli plants in the ground to be able to get these side shoots. If you have the space. If you don't, you can rip them out and plant something else for a second crop. But if you have the space, it's great to be able to get these little side shoots out of it. But it's not a guarantee. You'll see here's where one of my new broccolis are. This one just wasn't producing any side shoots, the big plant that was there, so I pulled it out. And actually, I just noticed this the other day. You can see this one, there is no new growth. So it's still alive, but it's not really doing anything. So I should definitely pull that one out. But the rest are still cranking away with their little side shoots. And then the Brussels sprouts. These are the biggest mystery to me. I'm starting to get nervous. I am getting some Brussels development on here, but these are pretty small. Usually I have harvestable Brussels sprouts by this point, and these guys are just limping along, slow. I mean, especially this one over here. Look at how little these are. These are like tiny marble size, like itty bitty. And it doesn't make sense to me because they look healthy. I would say that my Brussels sprouts typically are taller than this, but they seem healthy. They have good, strong leaf growth. I'm not seeing any of the cabbage worm damage. And the rest of my brassicas have been doing amazing. So it's not like the group as a whole is suffering. They've had pretty much perfect growing conditions all summer. It's been cool and rainy. The only thing I can think of is these Brussels sprouts. This is a new variety for me. That is the theme of this year. Katie, stop experimenting with new varieties. Just stick with what you like and what works. So definitely going to go back to my original variety next year and see if that was it. But yeah, kind of curious to see if we'll have anything out of these Brussels sprouts, which is a bummer. We love Brussels sprouts, and it's kind of such a wonderful fall treat, and they typically do really well for me. So I don't know. We'll see if they get it together. And then the last things on this second row is I do have some more fall plantings. These are my little bok choy. I planted these last week, I believe, and they're really taken to the garden. They're looking well. I think we'll definitely get a harvest out of these before fall hits. 2 more little broccoli plants, and then here is my epic failure. Look at these horrible, pathetic eggplants. This was not the year of the eggplant. It was way too cool. We were getting down into the 40s in June, the 50s in July, and 40s again here in August. So eggplant likes heat, needs heat. We're definitely not going to get anything out of these this year. So let's go ahead and pull these out. This is my first year of fully failing at eggplant. I usually can get at least a decent harvest. So this is kind of a bummer, but oh well. And now we'll have room for something else. And speaking of something else, let's talk about these bare spots. So this is open now, and then I definitely have some room around this cabbage here. So I've been thinking through what I want to, or mostly can, plant for a fall harvest. And we're mostly down to radishes, maybe some varieties of turnips if they're pretty small ones. So I think in the next few days I'll get out here, kind of refresh the soil with some new compost and loosen it up and direct seed in some radishes. And I think that'll be really nice. I had a great fall crop of radishes last year, so fingers crossed we'll get those again. now that we've moved on from the sad saga of the eggplant. I have some also sad marigolds. They're not looking super great. I don't think they have aster yellows. Maybe they do, but I don't know. This whole section is kind of SOL. But my celery is really starting to fill in. They're not super massive stalks, but these are great. I think they just needed a little bit more time, so I haven't really harvested much at all. I'm just gonna wait until the end, harvest it all, and I actually just freeze dry almost all of it. And I love being able to use it then for cooking all winter long. And then next after the celery is my little cluster of purple potatoes. These are little purple fingerling potatoes, which are new to me. I am so excited. I hope they turned out. And the foliage has completely died back, which is a good sign. Even though this looks totally pathetic and sad, that means that they're ready to harvest. So I was thinking maybe we could pull out a couple together and just see what we find under there. Okay, let's try this one just right up front. I mulched heavily with straw this year instead of hilling them to keep the tubers cool. So we'll see. Of course, we didn't really need much help with them staying cool this year. I like a pitchfork to kind of lift it up. When I had nice sandy, well, I won't say nice, but when I had sandy soil at my last homestead, potato harvest was so easy, but I have heavy clay soil now, so it's a little bit trickier. Well, so far I'm only harvesting worms. Hopefully there's some potatoes in here. That would be a disappointment. Let's try and dig a little bit deeper here. Actually, they're just hard to see because they're like the same color as the soil. They're itty bitty little guys. Oh man. I'm gonna need to spend some time like methodically digging around in here, but I will show you what I have. These guys are so cool. So they're supposed to be purple on the inside. They're obviously purple on the outside. I think we'll eat these for dinner tonight. So I'll call those purple potatoes. I think they're called Magic Molly potatoes. A moderate success. Seems like we have some in there, but they're not super prolific. I don't know. We'll see how they taste. That'll be my ultimate deciding factor on whether we do them again. Next is my store-bought zucchini plant, which I had so many doubts about when I first planted it. It looked awful, but it's really starting to fill out nicely. We're getting some good zucchinis on there. I've been trying to get out and harvest these every couple of days. And yeah, success. So hopefully, I don't think I'll probably do this again next year. I'm just going to get new seeds so that hopefully they germinate and I can grow my own zucchini. But for a store-bought variety that looked super sad in the beginning, I'm pretty pumped with it. And I haven't noticed any squash vine borer damage, so I'm ecstatic about that. I did have companion planting flowers all around the zucchini plant before I had to rip them all out. I still have one lone nasturtium that's kind of hanging on. I mean, there's like one flower, so it's not really doing much, but it doesn't look awful. So I haven't pulled that one out yet. And I do have one little marigold there. It's interesting how some of them are absolutely shrimpy while others are massive and doing really well back there. These ones are also doing well. So I don't know, treat them all exactly the same. Okay, we've already talked about the broccolis. Ooh, look at that side shoot. That is pretty much a whole new head. That is awesome. We'll have to grab that one. And then we've moved on to the sea of kale. I've been chatting about this on my last couple garden tours. I think I planted way too much. It's only the two of us. I have 6 of this variety here. And then I had 6 of this variety here. This one just wasn't thriving so well. 2 of them ultimately died, which is kind of unique. I feel like kale is one of the most hardy plants out there. They're like impossible to kill. And I don't know, this one just didn't do as well. So I've since done a little broccoli plant here to replace one of them and one of those baby cabbages here. I don't know. We'll see if these finish out in time. These guys are looking kind of wimpy. This is I think it's blackjack kale or black magic kale. Not sure. I think I'm ready to roll this one out. This guy is doing so much better. It's just such a hardy variety. I feel like it resists the cabbage worms so much better too, where this variety will get destroyed by them sometimes. This year we're actually looking pretty good. So I really think it was just those kohlrabi that are having the cabbage worms, at least so far. So fingers crossed, but This is way too much. And to be honest, we don't really eat kale in the summer. It's more of a winter crop for us. So I just freeze a bunch of it. And then we can put it into soups and stews and quiche and that type of a thing. So I think this is plenty. This will feed us all winter. And then next year, that'll free up this much space for something else. And I have been trying to go along and kind of pull off these old leaves that aren't good anymore. And that will help free up some understory space and just make the walking paths a whole lot more accessible. And the chickens love them. So I just throw them out in the yard and they have a great time with that. And here is the sad zone. So this is where all of my onions were and shallots. The shallots were good. They turned out amazing. I harvested those a few weeks ago, but last week's video was my onions bolting, which means that they need to be harvested immediately and preserved immediately. But the sad thing that happens when onions bolt or go to seed is that flowering stalk is super rigid and penetrates deep into the bulb, and so it can ultimately rot and it doesn't store very well. So what I ended up doing is kind of sorting my onions on which ones for sure bolted and had that really rigid neck to them, and I ended up putting them in my pan with some grass finished tallow and a little bit of salt, and then I freeze dried it. And so it's going to be a ready to use product that I can throw in my meals all winter long, and now they're going to store for years, hopefully, instead of rotting in a couple of months. Sorry for the noise. Ryan's doing some metal work over there. So thankfully there were still a few good ones in the batch, meaning they didn't have a flower stalk and they still had a pretty soft neck to them, or they just barely started to bolt. So I am curing those. I'm hoping that I can keep some for long-term storage because I love being able to braid onions and have them for fresh eating and storage. So we'll see. But I now have this big open area that I wasn't planning on having because usually my onions are in for at least a couple of more weeks. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm mostly down to radishes, turnips, and maybe some baby greens. And I'll probably for sure do that over here. I don't know, we can only eat so many of those things, so I might just let this section rest. We'll see, but I cleaned it up so it looks nice at least. I left the straw down to just protect the soil and keep the weeds down, even though weed season is pretty much done now. Here are two little cauliflowers. They really haven't grown all that much, especially this one. This one's kind of small, and I feel like I planted these maybe close to a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. So I was expecting more out of them. I may need to adjust my planting schedule to even earlier. So I don't know. We'll see what we get out of those. Next up is phase 1 of my pepper experiment. Peppers are something that I've always kind of struggled to grow. It's challenging enough in Minnesota with our short, cool season. And so my experiment is, this is bed 1, where it is in the ground and mulched. We have bed 2 over there, which we'll get to in a little bit, where it's in the ground unmulched, because mulch really modulates the temperature, which means this temperature of the soil is going to be about 6 degrees cooler than if you don't mulch. And so we'll see how those are doing. And then I have a third experiment of unmulched and in a raised bed up by the house. Ultimately, this group did the worst. The plants are pretty small and the color isn't so great either. They're kind of yellow, just not quite as deep and vibrant as the other ones, as you'll see as we move along. But overall, I mean, we're still getting some good fruit on there. I love these purple peppers. They are just so fun. We're finally starting to get some red coloration on these bell peppers, so I'm pretty pumped to be able to hopefully harvest this one in the next few days. These red picnic peppers are definitely a favorite. These are so sweet and delicious. They're perfect snack size. I just munch on these all the time when I'm working in the garden. And then the rest of these are all my Corno de Toro peppers. Here you can see this one is just about ready to pick. So they kind of turn this lovely red color. You can eat them green as well. They're just not very flavorful. These I kind of converted to growing instead of bell peppers because I just had better success with these, and they taste pretty similar to a bell pepper. You can see we have a lot more. It looks like about 3 peppers. This one has 4, where my bell pepper over there only had 1, so not quite as prolific. I have a few more marigolds here. These guys are doing really well. They're happy there. One last thing that we need to consider with the peppers as the season is coming to a close is potentially snipping off the growing tips, because that will signal to the plant, let's stop putting out new growth and let's direct our energy on ripening what we have. Next up, we have our sea of butternut squash, pumpkins, and corn. The corn is kind of hit and miss. You can see that we are getting close to harvesting, which is good. This one actually has a double ear, which is great. But then other ones are still looking pretty puny. And actually this one doesn't even have an ear on there. So I don't know, jury's still out on the corn. I think we are supposed to warm back up into the 80s, which will be much needed to get these warm loving crops the last little push that they need. I feel like we're kind of in a standstill with this cold snap that we've been really stuck in for weeks. So fingers crossed that we'll be able to harvest some corn. The squash though is doing amazing and holding on there. So have a decent number of butternut squash in there. I love butternut squash. It stores really well and it is typically not affected by the squash vine borer, but we are still trying to push out new fruit, and little ones like this are not likely to develop into a big, mature, ready to pick butternut squash within 30 days. So this is the time, since we're about a month before we freeze, where I get in there and start cutting these leaders off. And actually you can see this itty bitty squash here, so I'd probably snip it there to really help force the plant again to focus on ripening what it has and not waste its energy on this stuff. So there's quite a few leaders. You can see there's one over here, and that will help kind of clean up the garden and get this kind of junk off from crowding in my other plants. So that'll definitely be a good to do this week. Now there's no way that I'm gonna get to all of the leaders. I mean, there's just a whole sea in here. I'm not gonna bother crawling in here, but anything that I notice on the end, I'll snip that off. So far so good on disease for the squash. I was really worried that I would get some powdery mildew on the leaves with how much rain we've had this year, and I haven't noticed any, so thankful there. Here again, you can see we're getting some good ear development. Not quite ready to harvest yet, but we are close. Maybe by, next week sometime. Last time I was having trouble finding the pumpkins for you. I love growing Cinderella pumpkins, and now that they're starting to turn orange, I can find them. So we have one growing here. They are just so cute and delicious and prolific. Let's find the other one. I think I have 3. We'll see. Here's the other one. So that one's looking good in there. And I think there's a third one over here. Back to over where the onions are. Yes! Look at that beauty. This one even has some fun stripes on there. So super excited. I don't know if you guys can see, there's all those little butternut squash in there too. So should have a good squash harvest. And the way that I have the squash interplanted in the corn is really going to pay off this time of year, because as we start dipping down into those cool nights, the corn really does provide kind of a covering or a frost cloth effect on the squash vines. I'll notice that any of the vines that kind of come out into the walking paths will get some frost damage, where anything that is tucked underneath the corn is just fine. So that's really going to pay off as we start dipping down even more into those freezing temperatures in the next few weeks. And call me crazy, but I went ahead and planted another round of bush beans. This is where my garlic was. I harvested it in mid-July, and so we still had some good time for bush beans. I am a little worried about their growth. I'm starting to see kind of some wrinkling of the leaves. Not looking quite as good as my first crop. So not sure if it's a temperature thing, maybe there's a disease going on. I just kind of noticed this a couple days ago. I haven't had a chance to really look into it. So if you have any ideas, I will take it, but I'm starting to kind of question if we're really going to get a good harvest here or not, which is kind of surprising because my first crop of bush beans, let's go ahead and talk about them now, did amazing. If you remember from my garden tour last month, this was just massive and blowing into the walking paths. These guys are largely done now. Bush beans are a short producer, about 4 to 6 weeks or so, and it's largely done. We're not really getting any new bean development, and they're kind of thrashed now from me going through and harvesting every few days. So it's time to pull these guys out, which will open up another row. So I think I'm ultimately just going to have to leave some of these rows to rest. We're done planting. I don't want to do, 100 feet of radishes or anything like that. So I'm ready to let some of these sections just go to rest. We're starting to taper down. I'm okay with that. But gosh, I've harvested maybe 50, 60 pounds of green beans from this row. It was just incredible. I froze a bunch of it, I freeze dried a bunch of it. We made dilly beans and fermented beans. So I was able to preserve them 4 different ways, which is always fun. I'm kind of a person who likes to diversify my crop and not put all of my eggs in one basket. So that was really good. And I guess, if this doesn't work out so well, at least I got lots of beans over here. The carrots have been pretty hit or miss. That Aster Yellows has really been rocking my garden this year. You can see anything that kind of has this discoloration has the Aster Yellows. And so I'll go ahead and pull one up so you can see what that looks like. I've been trying to get them out of here as I think of it. Well, actually, this one looks pretty good. So typically they'll have lots of hairs on them if they really have a strong case of Aster Yellows, but this one actually looks great. So awesome. I really haven't harvested too much of the carrots yet. I largely just kind of leave them in until fall comes around, and then I'll just pack them all into storage. I have picked a few here and there for cooking, or in my sauerkraut recipe, I like to put shredded carrots, but largely I just kind of leave these guys until the last minute and then pack them away in my fridge. One thing I forgot to mention at the end of my new bean patch here is my old dill patch. There are no greens left on the stalk. They have all dried out and they're starting to go to seed. So I'm leaving these to use seed heads for canning pickles and that type of a thing, or mostly fermenting pickles or making quick pickles. I don't do much for canning pickles anymore. I just find that they just kind of get soft, and honestly I prefer fermented or quick pickles anyway. So been picking out these seed heads. I also like to leave them because they'll drop the seeds and then it'll self-seed itself for next spring. And I've always found that self-seeded dill grows so much better than anything that I try to grow. Like, let's say in the spring I drop some seed down. It's always puny, but the self-seeded dill does great. So we'll just let it create its own new patch for next year. All right, let's go over here to the potatoes. So this is my main potato crop, and we are starting to die back. We haven't fully died back yet, like those Magic Molly purple potatoes, so I'm not quite ready to harvest these. Plus, I need a cool spot to store them, and we're still, getting into that, at least the 70s during the day. So in the shop, it's still fairly warm. So I like to just kind of keep these guys into the ground until my storage spot gets a little bit cooler so that they keep longer. These are the red chieftain potato, and I've been growing that for many, many years. It always does super well. The potatoes are easier to find in the soil because they're kind of a red color. So they'll be easier to harvest than those purple potatoes over there. And actually I noticed that I can kind of peek at a couple under here because they're kind of right above the soil. For some reason they have pushed up. So these guys are here. We'll give them a few more weeks just to sit in that cool earth, and then we'll pull them out. And I did the same deep mulching method here like I did with the other potatoes. I just did an extra deep layer of the organic straw instead of hilling them. And I think that went okay. We'll really be able to know once I can dig them up. Well, let's go ahead and talk about mulch a little bit. We've been talking a lot about it this year, but if you're new here, I have since switched over to wood chips for my walking paths and organic straw for around my plants, and it's been awesome. You can see that I have very few weeds around, and I've spent very little time weeding. So that has really paid off. It's really helped with my soil quality. I'm noticing a lot of worms, so huge fan of mulch. Okay, so let's do the last push of my in-ground garden here. So here we have our sea of tomatoes, and these guys have been so great. These are my Mountain Vineyard tomatoes, which are, I just harvested, so let's see if we can find any ripe ones for you. There, so these are little grape tomatoes, and they are amazing. I haven't noticed hardly any blight. I mean, there's one leaf, but otherwise everything else has been just doing amazing. Even these lower down leaves, I guess maybe this one leaf has a little bit. I'll pull that off, but so great. If you have issues with blight, give this variety a try. I also love that they never crack. So even though we've had all sorts of rain and all the things, These are great. And I like to slice them in half and freeze dry them. And so then I can eat them all winter. They make great croutons. Love these. So I have 2 plants. These guys are doing great. And then another variety that I'm eating, this is my fresh slicer. I only have one of them in here because we don't eat too many fresh tomatoes, but these are just gorgeous. They have this red color with the green striping. They are delicious. Also, not seeing very much blight at all on here. It's just been a great prolific tomato. I'll definitely grow this again. And then all the rest of these tomatoes are my paste tomatoes or my canning tomatoes. So I have 2 different varieties going, one of which I greatly regret and I will never grow again. So let's go ahead and talk about the problem child first. So this is my Amish paste tomato, and you'll notice right away that they are having some cracking. Just the fruit itself isn't doing so great. You also notice that there's hardly any leaves on here, so I'm just getting blight like crazy. It is just taking over. I'm constantly hacking it off. This was a new variety for me to go and try and be adventurous, and I'm deeply regretting it. So never again on those. Here's another one. You can see that it's just the fruit itself isn't even looking all that great. It's just sad news. But the variety that I do love and I will go back to growing 100% is my Plum Regal. And you can see that, I mean, they're just loaded with tomatoes. And the fruit itself looks a whole lot better. There's no cracking or any issues. I just harvested all the ripe ones, so there's not too many to show you, but just way less disease issues. There's a little bit, but not much at all. These have been happy plants. Much prefer the Plum Regal, that's for sure. And same with the discussion about the squash and the peppers. It is time to start topping our tomato plants. So I need to go through here and start kind of trimming off these leaders because these little guys are not going to be harvestable tomatoes within a month. So it's time to start directing that energy into helping it ripen everything that's down here. Here is pepper experiment number 2 with another little marigold here who's still hanging on here. And these guys, by first glance, already look better. You can see that they have deeper color to them and they're a lot taller, just have more vigorous growth than the ones that are mulched. So I think the little bit of temperature boost that they're getting from no mulch is paying off. There are definitely more weeds in here. I need to get in here and do some weeding. But I think the cost-benefit ratio for peppers, at least, who need that heat, is paying off. These hot peppers I'm getting a little worried about, but actually, so we have one little orange habanero down there. We'll see if we can get the rest to ripen in time. The poblanos are doing great though. I'm having an awesome poblano year. These guys are all cayennes. They're doing great. I'm just kind of staking up any of them with a stick if I need to. I already harvested a lot of the red ones, so there's not many to show you, but that one's going to be ripening soon. Cayennes in Minnesota always do great. They just ripen quickly. They don't need as much time. They don't seem quite as bothered by the cool weather. So I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. I have another one up by the house, I believe. So the jalapeno, we're hanging on there, doing okay. But the one I really have my eye on are my Scotch bonnets. I absolutely fell in love with Scotch bonnet hot sauce and I want to make my own so badly. But they are a Jamaican pepper. They like hot, long seasons, which we don't really have here in Minnesota. So we'll see. I don't know. Fingers crossed. And the last thing we have to talk about here in my back garden are my cucumbers. They're still cranking away, doing well, and actually, oh my, it looks like I haven't been back here to harvest in a while. This is a little bit too big. We'll give this one to the chickens. They can start getting a little bit seedy. Come here, guys. We'll see what she thinks. Oh yeah, she loves her cucumbers. This is a better size. This is what I'm looking for. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of fridge pickles. I think we have 3 gallons of fridge pickles, which will last up to a year in the fridge. They are awesome. And then I've been doing a handful of fermented pickles as well. So definitely packing away the cucumbers. This one's a little bit bigger than I like to. So let's go ahead and give this one to the chickens. You guys sharing? There you go. And over here are my little cucamelons. I don't know. These were supposed to be something fun to try and they're okay, but they're not amazing, meaning their taste. Like, they're growing fine. They look healthy. I haven't had disease issues, but they're just kind of blah. They didn't taste quite as sweet and delicious as I was expecting. So I don't think I'll do those again. But as far as variety goes, these are my H19 pickling cucumbers. I've been growing these for years. They're awesome, dependable. Haven't had any pest or disease issues. And these guys, I could go in and snip the growing tips, but they're not really causing problems or getting in the way. And I feel like I already have harvested so many cucumbers. We have enough pickles. I'm just gonna let this do its thing. Well, that is it for the back garden here. Let's head up to the cabin where you can see some other experiments that I'm doing and the rest of what I'm growing. Okay, so we've made it up to our cabin. I have 3 different raised beds in here and super excited to show you a few things. Let's start with the peppers since we've been talking a lot about peppers. Look at this amazing growth. It is dark green, vibrant, full, tall. I mean, granted, this isn't a raised bed, but this is almost my shoulder height. So having the raised bed increases the soil temperature a little bit. And then I did no mulch. That is really paying off. These pepper plants are just doing amazing. And this is a Scotch bonnet. So my hopes are really high on this one that I'll be able to get some good peppers out of here. But these guys aren't quite ready to be ripe yet either. So we will see. These are all cayennes, lots of peppers on here. Again, I just harvested the red ones, so no red ones to show you, but plenty there. This is the red picnic pepper. Those plants were puny out in my in-ground garden, and there are so many more peppers on this one. So really starting to rethink my pepper plan for next year. I think I might just move them all up here to these raised beds. Then on this one, not much new here. My marshmallow plant has absolutely gotten huge. This is an herbal medicine plant. You harvest the roots actually, but not until year 2. So I'm just kind of letting this one go. It's flowering and looking beautiful. St. John's wort, we're looking great. I'm still picking off these blooms and drying them to make a tincture. These are just really great for kind of winter blues, which can definitely come in strong here in Minnesota. St. John's wort can interact with certain medications though, so please consult with your provider before you start taking that. Over here are the strawberry plants. Those are largely June bearing, so I haven't picked a strawberry in a while. Just kind of letting these guys hang out. And this is my latest experiment. I'm pretty hopeful about this. So these are intermixed different turnips and rutabagas. The root maggots absolutely destroyed my crop this spring, and these are such a great survival winter crop for us. We really depend on these. They store super well, like months and months and months in the fridge. So I added this insect netting to kind of create a protective barrier, hopefully, and they are just looking awesome so far. So I'm really hoping they'll finally get to harvest some. I still have my basil in here. It's kind of on its last leg, that's for sure, but I think I can probably get at least another round of pesto into the freezer before I pull these guys out. I have a new round of green onions going for a succession crop because my green onions from this spring are just absolutely massive. These guys are on their last leg here, that's for sure. And in front of the green onion, I do have little bits of dill. These are ones that I did seed, and as I mentioned earlier, I feel like any ones that I try to plant direct seeding just don't end up quite as prolific as ones that naturally self-seed. So you can see they're quite a bit shorter and smaller than the other ones in the in-ground garden, but still worth doing. It's nice to have some fresh dill where my other stuff is done. And then this section has had a big change lately. So this is where I had the baby greens, and which kind of just converted over to kale once all the greens had bolted. And these are some nice little fall lettuces. So I have a few different varieties going. So I think these are going to be a great cool season crop. And I love that they're close to the cabin, so I can just run out and grab a salad anytime. And then over here is my nice little landscaping garden. I have a video from this spring when I put this in if you're interested in converting your landscaping into edible landscaping. Highly recommend it. So here my chives are doing really well. This is the first year of chives, so we're really coming in strong. I think come next year we should hopefully get some blooms. And these are actually my great-grandpa's irises that I inherited. So not food, but special to me. So they definitely earned a spot in this little garden. These are 2 blueberry plants. I love blueberries for landscaping. I think they're beautiful and they can be prolific, but they're done for the season, so those are just hanging out. The thing that's not working out all too well over here is my rhubarb. This is my prized rhubarb. This plant is about 150 years old. I have 4 different clumps here. It's been passed down through my family for generations. It actually made it over from Sweden on the boat, so I am very protective of it, and so I'm pretty sad that it's not doing so well. And I think the issue here is it's just too hot. This is a south-facing wall. It gets pretty good sunlight here. You can see at least pretty much full sun, minus this tree here, but definitely through the afternoon. And then when it hits the cabin, it just kind of bakes in here. And so I think I am going to move this to a cooler and maybe partially shaded area where I think it'll do a lot better. I'll do that in the spring. So we'll just let it hang out. And then early spring, we'll dig it out and move it somewhere else. The herbs are doing well. This is my thyme that I transplanted from the in-ground garden. I wanted to free up some space in the in-ground garden and get my herbs close to the house. And these guys are doing well. They're loving it. The rosemary is new, but it's new every year because it typically doesn't survive our Minnesota winters. When I lived in Kansas City, it did. That was so nice. I had this huge, beautiful rosemary bush, but I'm hoping to play with this heat issue with the cabin and being protected here to my favor to see if maybe, just maybe, these will survive the winter. We'll see. And if you remember from my last garden tour, I had these guys sitting on the front porch. This is my oregano, this is mint, and this is lemon balm. These can be kind of invasive, so that's why I have them in pots. But they were getting too hot on the front porch, I think. So I moved them over here where they get kind of some part shade, and then they have more earth contact, and that's been working out well. They're looking a whole lot better, so I learned my lesson there. I had a few extra lettuce plants, so I just threw them here. So far the bunnies haven't found them, so we'll see how long they last. I have another crop of cilantro. I think I timed this one well. They're still itty bitty, but they like cooler weather, then they won't bolt like these. This is my older cilantro that has totally bolted, but the bees are loving it, so I'm just kind of leaving it for now. And I probably should have done 3 crops, like 1 more in between this one and that one, because right now I don't have any cilantro to pick. This is far gone and this isn't ready yet, so next year I'll probably try for 3. The sorrel is definitely starting to look better. I feel like all summer it looked like it was ready to die at any time, where this is now starting to thrive and kind of come back. And this is supposed to be a perennial, so I'm hoping next year will really be our year for the sorrel, but I haven't even tried any of it yet. I haven't picked any of it, and we're starting to look like maybe it can afford to lose a couple leaves, so I'd like to at least try some of it before the season's over. And then lastly, we have my last round of herbs. These are parsley, and then I have sage here, and these guys are loving it. So I was a little worried that it was going to be too shady here, but they're really doing great. I think what also helped is we finally took that birch tree down. If you guys remember, there was kind of a broken and hanging birch tree here, but now it's open a little bit. So we have a little strip of sunshine, and I think that's perfect. Everyone's looking really happy over here. Well, I think that's it for a garden tour. It's been a fun season so far, lots of ups and downs. I still have a few more last key things I need to get done before we lean into this last phase of the gardening, like getting my radishes seeded, some baby greens, maybe some turnips, and then snipping off those growing tips for my tomatoes for sure, probably my peppers, well, and the squash. So we still have a few things left to do, and then we just kind of cruise, minus all the food preservation. I guess we're doing lots of that. So it's definitely been an interesting growing year. Thanks so much for being along with the journey. I so appreciate you guys. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you on the next one.